KGB. Who was the first person who saw the KGB? He worked hard for 12 years to get the information from the papers. He organized the KGB for the next 15 years. He had the history of the KGB in London. What is the name of the man? What is the history of the KGB? How did the KGB become so rich in the last 40 years? How did the Soviet Union, Russia and the current F.S.B follow the KGB? The history of the KGB is in the blood, the flesh, and the brain. The history of the KGB has a history of thousands of years. What is the history of the KGB? Will KGB's history start from 1954 or 1500? This is KGB Part 2. Beloved world people. Greetings from Worldpedia. KGB. Remember the name Vasily Mitrokhin. For 12 years Vasily Mitrokhin was the only person who knew the history of KGB, Soviet Union, and Russia. He read all the top secret documents without leaving them for 12 years. He compiled all the documents and sent them to London. Vasily Mitrokhin was the one who created fear among the people. KGB started in 1954. But from 1917, the KGB was the first organization to start. In October 1917, the October Revolution started. The October Revolution started in the year 1927. The October Revolution started in the second month of the October Revolution. What was the job of the KGB? The job of the KGB was to investigate, arrest and punish the people who were arrested. The KGB has killed nearly 1,40,000 people. So 1914. This is the first version of the KGB. This is the first version of the KGB. But we have to go back 500 years. We know that the KGB was the first Tsar King. Have you heard about the first Tsar King? Have you ever wondered how cruel the first Tsar King was? The first Tsar King was Ivan Nang. Ivan Nang. We are standing in 1564. Ivan Nang was the first Tsar King. But how did they bring in the fourth Ivan? They called him Ivan the Terrible. You can search for Ivan the Terrible in Google. You can search for Ivan the Terrible in your bookshop. You will find the true face of the Tsar King. You will find the true face of the Tsar King in the book called Ivan the Terrible. You will become scared the moment you see Ivan the Terrible. His rule was so include. There was a group of people who feared the terrible. But there were some brave mean. Ivan Nal was very spirit of Kachin. His invalidity was fierce to all. There are many enemies. To defeat the enemies we need an organization. The organization is called Ivan the Terrible. The name of the organization is Oprichina. The people who work in the organization are called Oprichines or Oprichniks. The Oprichniks really want to punish the army against the people they kill. If someone stands against the Oprichniks will come for the troops to come up with ways to destroy the army using the Oprichniks' doves. The Oprichniks will go to babies' countries and other places automatically to catch the Oprichnik army. When they find someone like Ivan, the Ofria will get his owners. We will take care of this guy from the afterlife. They did not put the captured people in the tanks. They used to cut the bones, burn the bones in the oil, pour the hot water, cut the bones and bury them in the tanks. This was a very violent operation by the Oprichines. The Oprichines were in power for 7 years. The Oprichines were protecting the Ivan family. The Oprichines were thinking that they could arrest anyone who was against the Ivan family. But the Oprichines found that many of the people who were with Ivan were also working against him. So the Oprichines were not able to do anything. The Oprichines were trying to kill everyone. Suddenly the Crimean Tatars were going to attack Russia. The Crimean Tatars were coming to attack us. The Oprichines were thinking that they have done a lot of mistakes. The Ivan family was the one who chose the Oprichines. The Ivan family will give a statement to the Oprichines. The Ivan family will say that they will protect the Oprichines. They will say that they will protect the vassals, the Oprichines. They will also say that they will not leave anyone. Only 6,000 Oprichines were in the Vasily battle camp. The government used the decision of the government to arrest the ceremony leaders. COVID-19 gave the kickdown to the Indian government. They arrested the government. This army came into my country and took over my army. I have a strategy to arrive. The people who were killed by the Sardinians were gone. The Sardinians were the reason for the destruction of Ivan IV. So Ivan IV closed the Sardinian War for 7 years. This was the first Sardinian War of KGB. It ne haver KGB uruna nachos stooliti and destructive weapons to minist Palestine near Stephen. The Sardinian order was complete. But why mainly suspicion about the Sardinian War? The Sardinian army was damaged by the Sardinian War. So VY started to build an army. VY entered like John Nia VY of Adams. She was 10 years old when the war ended, and then after 19F ironically on the temple period, she died being 17. So Catherine started to resource in the dictation of the army. She gave up her job and went to do a job in. Alexander was surrounded by a group of people. His life was saved. Alexander knew that he needed an army to protect his country. He needed an army to protect his country, but he needed an army to protect his family. He started a department called the Department on Securing the Order and Public Peace in the city of Petersburg. The group's goal was to establish a peace in the country. Alexander's job was to protect his country. But the group was not in a peaceful state. Alexander's job was to arrest the people who spoke against Alexander. Alexander's job was a great surprise to the people. He wanted to arrest and punish the people. He started a new force called the Narodnaya Olya. Narodnaya Olya was the name of Narodnaya Olya. Narodnaya Olya was a tank in the People's Army. Alexander's job was to kill the proper Enbiot group Narodnaya Olya. Now Alexander was a very famous Numenor. There was a news river that the Narodnaya people from Paulina lived in between the cities. Alexander was one of the little infidel Jews who went ordend without an agreement. The people started to kill the second Alexander. The people tried to kill the second Alexander 3 times in 1879 and 1880. The department that created the second Alexander was a group. The second Alexander wanted to give the group more rights. The second Alexander wanted to create the Department of State Police. The Department of State Police was created in the 19th century. The Department of State Police was given many powers. The second Alexander wanted to give the second Alexander more rights. In 1881 on March 1, the second Alexander was surrounded by 5 people. The second Alexander was killed by the second Alexander. The third Alexander was killed by the second Alexander. The second Alexander was given the third Alexander's life. The third Alexander was asked whether he will get the third Alexander's life or not. The third Alexander was a power that was against the people and the government. The third Alexander was a power that was against the government. The Department of State Police was not enough to solve this issue. The government needs to have a secret security system. The government needs to know who is trying to kill the people. This is the reason for the creation of the second Alexander. Security and equality. The second Alexander's plan was to add Annas. The second Alexander was the third Alexander Peter. The 2 Alexanders together were able to make peace with the Pays. The Operation to Giants was kept in the hands of the battle for the crown of Indonesia. The war was drawn to an end. the Iran Sultanate and Germany. Lots of long-time lapse victims of war started to appear. The Bliben in Jordan were attracted to an Amerikaner distribute items. The British Army had decided in 2018. Ukraine. Ukraine has three things to protect itself from. It has to protect itself from the Tsar. It has to stop the war. It has to stop the crimes committed by the communists, and they need to pay more. They have to reduce their wage. Ukraine has to protect the Tsar and stop the Black Death. New ways of working. The workers have closed down. The workers are fighting for their rights, and communism has started to spread. The next enemy is China. The Soviet Union was created. The next government was given to Ukraine. Ukraine was to become a leader. How did Ukraine become a leader? Ukraine had a long experience. In the past, Ukraine had a strategy to protect the king. Now Ukraine has to be a leader to the people. Now Ukraine has to activate its strategy to serve the people. They are pushing Ukraine to be a project's leader. Ukraine has not recruited any British people who work with the British Azul Web. Suddenly the names of the workers became members of Ukraine. In the game of skirt it was all done by Mitar. In the game of skirt it was all done by Metter. The first group of unionists started from the bottom. The workers were turned into unionists. The army that had been protecting the Sarmanan was trained by the unionists. Okay, the Visa fridge is open. The present Colosseum between Russia and Ukraine. The Ablaze army began to take the politically direction of the unionist leader Ural Peter. When the people of Ukraine are to come in, they'll ask the unionist leaders to help and flat the money. With the money given, those Ukrainian leaders will start to attack Ukraine. People will come in to offer, control and torture to the unionist leaders. They will try to deal with the seniors, giving them their money, and initially give it to the expensive soldiers. So the Ukrainians started to search for the people of Russia. The Ukrainians started to search for the people of Russia to find out when there will be a war between Russia and the Russian people. In 1905, this communist movement started to get involved in the war. There was a doubt because these Muslim people started to work. The initiators of the war kill and beat the Ukrainians as they wanted to solve their problems. The Ukrainians started to be sloppy. In order to solve the issue, they were working to create the people's community, that is intensity and energy. In the same mission, the Ukrainians gave a lot of allowance to the Ukrainians, which distracts the China people. They have not been able to track who the enemy is. They have not been able to track the next steps of the enemy. They have not been able to track the next steps of the enemy. So the file system was brought by Sergei Zubitov. Sergei Zubitov categorizes the file system for a person, for a company or for a union. So the Ukrainians can easily identify the people who are involved in the war. They can easily identify the people who are involved in the war. The history of the war is written in the file system. I will now connect to the file system. This is the file system which was used by Vasily Mitrokhin for 12 years. He had the complete details of the file system. His name was Vasily Mitrokhin. Vasily Mitrokhin has been involved in the war since the time of Ivan Nong. He was involved in the war in 1905. The World War 15 was the 2020 war, etc. In their fate, they have written the whole history of the Industrial Revolution. They have documented how to communicate with the people and give support to the CIA officers. They have wrote this fate documents. So the question is, were they able to find out the truth? The Ukrainians will arrest a lot of people. They will arrest them and lock them up in a prison. After 1 to 2 days, they will release them. The people who will be released are happy to hear this news. The May battlefields were cruel. Having been released, the Ukrainians will question this request. What will the raid done to thousands of people? The Ukrainian soldiers will ask to the into the part of the zone. Some Polish accumulators will say okay to the terrorists. The Ukrainian soldiers understand the okay will be released. If the okay go out and ask for a response, they will document the mistake. The OK will say that they will become a spy, and if they do anything against the Ukrainians they will be arrested and they will be sentenced to death. The OK will say that they will become a spy, and if they do anything against the Ukrainians they will be sentenced to death. This is like a normal leader. What will happen if they change the leader to a new leader? The war between the Ukrainians will change. If we say that the Ukrainians are normal people, there is a twist. The leader of the KGB is still the president of Russia. His name is Putin. Putin became the leader of the Soviet Union and Russia. His name is Joseph Stalin. There is a rumor that Joseph Stalin was also a spy. There are also people who deny this. The Ukrainians are ready for the next stage of the transformation. The KGB and the Czech Republic will be the new KGB, and the Czech Republic will be the new KGB. What will happen before the transformation? What are the laws and progresses? What will be the structure of the KGB? This will be discussed in the third part of the video. In the first part we discussed about what does KGB mean. In the second part we discussed the concept of the KGB becoming a strict force. After all this you will understand that we will have a lot of experience. After this the game of KGB will start. From the fourth part each operation of the KGB will be before you. Before you the pressure will be on all of you. Will come to you. So please wait for part 3. Comments about this post are most welcome. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. Let's all together create a greater community by sharing the truth.